this computer. We're going to record this so that other people can see some of our discussion and question. And tonight, if any night you want to talk or need to talk, that's what tonight's topic is about, because it's just us as a group of 7 or 8 people discussing the Outdoor Ministries Connection survey from 2018. Just as a bit of a backgrounder, the Outdoor Ministries Connection is a larger body that we belong to as United Church of Canada camps. So the Outdoor Ministries Connection is a group of mainline denominations get together to try and do more ecumenical things together. And I have had the privilege through the Mission Service Fund of the United Church of Canada to attend 3 Outdoor Ministry Connection meetings with the Presbyterians, the Lutherans. This is all together. We're in one place. So Presbyterian Church Camp and Conference Association, the Lutheran Outdoor Ministries, the United Church of Christ Outdoor Ministries Association, the United, the Church of the Brethren is sometimes there, but not always there. There is a Southern Baptist that is there, but only 1 or 2 people belong to it. And then the Methodist, what is the name of the Methodist that I'm forgetting? UCRM. They're the biggest component. I'm going to share, I did send out links to the surveys, both the big survey and the smaller survey. And when I talk about big and smaller, I'm actually talking about the results. And so the results in the big survey are all 303 unique camps that have responded to the survey in 2018. And they were represented from 49 states and 9 Canadian provinces. When I refer to the smaller survey, what I'm referring to is the data that is just ours. So because we had, in 2016, we only had, I think, 6 camps respond to the survey. And so we didn't get our own data set. We got a data set that was matched up with the United Church of Christ's Outdoor Ministry Association. This year we had 24. I'm going to share that portion of my screen. It's going to look a bit awkward because we're about to go into, nope, we're all good. Excuse my cough. So in 2018, we had enough camps filled out that we got our own data report based on the 24 camps. And so just so we're all aware, Sacred Playgrounds is the consulting firm that's been doing this survey, and it's happened 3 times. So this is 2014, 2016, 2018. In theory, it would happen again in 2020. And what we're doing is building up a database of information for outdoor ministries across North America. Jacob Sorensen is the gentleman who put it together. And if you hadn't read the report, you can read things like this after. But I have highlighted some things as we move forward. So he gave us a report highlights and findings, and then I've just highlighted things in the report on this PDF. And if you have comments, feel free to unmute yourself and talk as we go through this. Because the important question, and the question that we need to ask ourselves, I believe, as we go through this data is what does this mean for us going forward, right? How do we as camps in Canada apply this knowledge so that we can either change what we're doing or continue along that same path as we go forward? And so under the report highlights and findings, United Church of Canada, so he's represented us as UC Canada because there is a United Church in the States. We focus primarily on children and youth programming. I don't think that is a surprise to any of us. We are mostly centralized, meaning that when we run a camp, we tend to run it from one site. That's fine. The United Church of Canada, we tend to be much smaller operations than other Outdoor Ministries Connection camps. Smaller budgets, less acreage, and fewer staff. It does, as he says, limit our ability to offer additional programming, and that programming might be rental group or retreats for older people. That also gets into the type of sites that we have and the accommodation. We rely mainly on seasonal staff members with no year-round paid staff. Very few of our sites have year-round paid staff, and that'll come up later as well. We do tend to prioritize outdoor education and rustic skills. A large majority of our camps offer environmental education programs. We are more likely to offer leadership training programs than other outdoor ministry camps. This I didn't fully understand why they don't offer leadership training programs, but it is something, maybe it's the way that we as Canadian United Church Camps call what we do. We name it as leadership, and we're not sure. Number 6 is an interesting one. I'd be intrigued to hear people's thoughts. Jordan and Kathy as regional and national office staff. I'll read this in full. So most of our sites are classified as type 1 ministry centers with a low emphasis on faith and a weak connection to our congregational ministries and denominational teachings. They cover this later in it, and it's interesting to think that out of the 24, so if we have 50 to 55 sites across the country, 24 sites responded, I believe. And this idea that we have a low emphasis on faith and a weak connection, these are the way we answered the questions. So I'm not sure, and I'm not going to put anybody I'm not going to call you out. If you answered the survey, this is an interesting question as to why, right? Like, why do we identify that way? I didn't, in fact, answer the survey for our organization. It came through and my camp director answered it. But that's an interesting question. And then summer camp enrollment was on an upward trend in 2018. More than half of the responding sites reported a higher camp enrollment than the previous summer, and almost half were on a 5-year high. So I'll just keep going through. Remember, you need to interrupt me. I don't see your video right now because I'm looking at my screen. So part 1 in the general camp statistics, as I said, 24 unique ministry centers responded, and that represented 8 Canadian provinces. 11 of the 24 were located in Ontario. Just for those outside of Ontario, I apologize, but we have 19 of our 50 some odd camps come from Ontario. So it's not a surprise at all that 11 of our 24 responding centers would be from Ontario. Then it just goes over who filled that out, mainly camp directors, and then some board members were there as well. This map highlights that out of the responses, 75% came from Eastern Canada, and they're using the Ontario-Manitoba border as Eastern and Western, and 25% came from out West. I actually think that that's representational of where our camps are, except for Alberta, because Alberta has a ridiculous amount of camps. I'm not sure what that number is in total. I have a map somewhere else. Ryan might know off the top of his head, but I think it's 8 or 9. Okay, 7 camps from Alberta, which is out west, is the most of any one place. It's in fact the highest concentration of United Church camps in a single province, like after Ontario, right? So it's the second highest. Going down, it talked about property size, and I don't know the value that I see in this. It could be that Um, it's just interesting. It's interesting to note that it's split in about a third, and a third. So a third own less than 20 acres, which was surprising because I grew up at a camp that had more than 20 acres, and I thought I thought was tiny. But if you have less than 20 acres, that's really small. 20 to 100 acres tends to be another third, and then above 100 acres is your other third, and they split that into the two. As far as budgets, about 2/3 of our camps have an annual budget of under 350,000, which doesn't surprise me. Um, One of the things that you may not understand if you haven't traveled to American outdoor ministry sites is that the majority of them run year round. The majority of those OMC sites, be it whatever denomination, have a full-time person, and the majority of those people tend to be ministry based, as in it's a call, and it's part of their church system, which is really, really interesting, um, in that sense. Um, and so a very small, 1/3 have a budget above that sort of $500,000 mark, in our sites. Um, it is interesting to note that in this survey, when we're looking at results, Michael's not on the call tonight, but Michael Schuberg is the executive director or associate director at Five Oaks in Ontario, which is a retreat education center is what they used to be called. This would have been Five Oaks and Naramata and Tanamagush. And he answered, I believe that he answered these questions, which means that there's always a point where Jacob mentions that one focuses only on adult programming, mainly. And so that's just something to note moving forward. 62% of our camps had no full-time staff members, not a surprise. 21% employed one full-time staff member, and 17% of that 24 answering employed two or more full-time year-round staff. So he states the obvious here. It's clear from these initial stats that our camps are smaller operations on average than OMC. We have less acreage, fewer paid staff member, and lower annual budgets. This smaller scale means less overall capacity to provide programmatic options and administrative oversight, which plays out in the remainder of the report. Administrative oversight, I know that Jordan, and I'm sure that Kathy's going to learn as well, in her role, that sometimes that lack of full-time staff or accountability, nothing against board members, Doug, I'm not against board members, but what it means is that sometimes things get lost in the shuffle of life because there's not someone who is doing that administrative oversight quite as diligently as a staff member. Many of our camps, I'm sure, are totally fine. So general ministry overview, 4%, one site, primarily adult conferences and retreats. That would be Five Oaks in this case. 79% are primarily youth and child camping, which once again isn't a surprise, but goes to this point that we are a summer camp first culture. And I will be the first to say, I don't think we need a change from a summer camp first culture if we can sustain being a summer camp first culture. 17% have a combination of youth and child summer camping and year-round retreats. And so Pierce Williams, I know that Rick at Lambton Center would have answered in that 17%. So there's 8% of that, right? If one site is 4%, then two sites would be close, somewhere around 8%, which means that you have 4 sites that answered this that would have had that sort of focus. And I'm not sure how some other camps answered, right? Like, I don't think that Kenessary would have answered year-round retreats, right? Or big canoe, right? Because we're not set up for those. The evaluation methods is an interesting section, and I didn't know what to highlight. It essentially talks about how we evaluate things. And so the question I have is, it makes me wonder when you see this, the blue being what other sites, that average of the 303 minus us sites have, compared with R24. But essentially you can see here this difference of 46 to 77% on participant survey at the end of a camper retreat. This is indicating to us that we're not surveying our campers at the end of a camp week, or some over 50% of us aren't. The same as we're not surveying parents about their child's experience. And fewer of us have online, and and only 13% of us indicate that we do not do an effective job of evaluating our programs. And so somewhere in here, there's a lie to ourselves if you follow this data down, unless I'm reading it incorrectly and somebody wants to correct me. But I think that's essentially, it's only 13% of us recognize we don't do that job well. I know that at Pierce Williams, we do, years ago, I'm not sure how other people grew up at camp, but I grew up in a camp culture where you were evaluated as a camp staff every single week. And so as I've moved from camp to camp over the years, and I've been at a few different ones, I've really focused on making sure that our camp staff have that evaluation. But also here I've learned, and through private camping, that if we don't ask our campers what they liked or our parents what they liked, then we can't continue to improve and give them that survey. So Jacob notes that our sites show lower levels of evaluations than other OMC sites, a sign of limited administrative capacity. This goes back to that idea of, well, what do you do with it afterwards? It's notable that fewer than half of responding sites surveyed participants at the end of a camp season or retreat experience. And it's the most common amongst OMC sites as a whole. And so that can be a written, it can be an online. We at Pierce Williams started giving away a free week of camp to parents who, we would do a draw for one free week the following summer for any parents who filled the survey out by September 15th online. So that was their incentive, and we are getting a ton more now that we do that. Camp type. Just wait a second. Camp type, I've highlighted where we fit mostly. And this is not a question that we would have answered. It's a question that he builds on through our answers to get to this information. And so, because I don't think, well, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't think the majority of us would answer that we're low faith emphasis with a weak connection to congregation denominational ministry. Type 2 would be a moderate faith emphasis with a moderate connection. Type 3 would be a high faith emphasis with a weak connection. And type 4 would be a high emphasis with a strong connection. So this is showing that many of our UC sites, only 4%, once again, we know that in this survey, it doesn't say that a limited, so 4% would represent one of our facilities, meets that sort of criteria, whereas 3 were a weak connection with high faith. Sorry, not 3, that's just the number beside it, 13%. 29% were moderate connection with moderate faith, but over half of the people who responded came up as a weak connection with low faith. It could also be that the way you define faith and the way we define faith is, right? Like two different people define faith in different ways. And I know that over the 15 years I've been in United Church camping, and I've sat in meetings with Jordan, and I've sat in talks with lots of United Church people, including like previous Big Canoe directors, Doug, right? That faith is solely it's a self-defined term in United Church camping. And so I can't go to Camp Kidston and judge their faith program objectively because I run a different faith program. It's a weird. So we were the only OMC camps that were we're the only OMC camps that were identified as a majority Type 1 camps. And we also showed the lowest percentage of Type 4 camps, which is that high, strong connection, high faith. This is an interesting. There is evidently a disconnect between camping ministries and constituent congregations of the United Church of Canada. 27% of responding directors indicate that they have a moderately low connection with their constituent ministries, while a sizable 59% indicated that their connection is moderately strong. There was little evidence for programmatic or philosophical connection in other portions of the survey. For example, only 27% of directors indicated the goal of strengthening and supporting congregations was very or extremely important. And only 33% agreed that it is important for our staff and campers to understand the theology and practices of our faith tradition. This last portion is probably the worst thing that our national office could hear, because I know that we have been trying time and time and time again to get our theology and faith formation correct at camp, or I am doing air quotes, correct, based on national office priorities, right? Or that's a harder conversation, and it's an ongoing. There is a faith formation document sitting up on my shelf. And faith emphasis also seems to be low or very low among our camps. Two Christian practices that were nearly ubiquitous at other OMC camps were practiced daily at only about half of United Church camps. These were Bible study and group prayer. I'm not sure what we define Bible study as. Does chapel count as Bible study? Does learning about the Bible count as Bible study? And group prayer, yeah, I don't know. Moving on to part 2, and we can come back and revisit any of this as we move forward. Moving on to part 2, camp directors. 100% were white, but 50 were male and 50% were female, which is way above average for the OMC. As far as 67% had no formal theological education, compared with only 31% at non-UCC camps. So all of our other OMC partners all have many more people with theological education. And only one director had a Master's of Divinity degree. I have no idea who that is, but good on you. Is that you? That's Rick. Is that you, Rick? Yes, it is. Look at that. I do not have a Master's of Divinity degree. Good news. 0% of our camp directors that responded are over the age of 60, so we're all good. We have years ahead of us to go. What is this? 46% of our directors are under the age of 30, which is fascinating. And then when you go over here to director tenure, if this is true and 4% equals 1, then I am that 4% of a 10-year plus tenure at a camp. Whereas down here, if you under 2 years, we have 54% of our directors. If you add this 37 and 17, 54% are less 2 years or less at their camp. And so this goes back to that idea of accountability is not the word, but this idea of systematic knowledge and how that is shared and whatnot. There's a great gender balance among UCC directors, better than most other. We're less educated on average than their counterparts. It's funny that an American would tell us this. In larger OMC study, there is a strong correlation between a lack of theological education and a weaker connection to congregations and denominations. We were much younger than on average. A large majority, 71% were 40 or under. I didn't do that math, but yes. Yeah, 25 and 40. So we're 40 or under, including the 25% that were less than 25 years old. And a majority had been in their position for only 2 years. It's evident that, along with the statistics, that many camps rely on young adult seasonal directors. And as some of us know out there, relying on young adult seasonal directors does not always work. In fact, more than often can lead to, doesn't always, but can lead to a decline in enrollment because of the perceived lack of trust in a person, as if they're only there as a camp director for the 4 months. As for part 3, summer camp, overall summer camp program, and it's to note 22 camps answered this. Most of us had a co-ed residential summer camp. 14% ran a combination of traditional summer camp and retreats, and 4% focused mainly on retreats. Then it just goes through day programs, partial week sessions, week-long sessions, which 100% of us have, 2-week sessions, which very few of us have, more than 2 weeks, even fewer. We offer 6 to 7 weeks of programming. 9% offer fewer than 6 weeks of programming, and 13% offer 10 weeks or more. It's interesting to note, we have some camps out there. I was on the East Coast. That's when I was at Kidston, and we have a camp in New Brunswick that runs 1 week in the summer, 1 week of day camp, Camp Widgeseagum. And when you say that, you're like, oh, how can you run for 1 week? But they take like 150 kids for 1 week. And they're also a partner camp. They partner, I think their site is co-owned by some Baptist churches as well. So it's an interesting partnership in that sense. As for summer camp programs, mostly centralized, meaning running out of the same place. Our average weekly camp fee is around $347, roughly equivalent to the $341 average in 2016, meaning our rates haven't gone up we've stayed on par. A third of camps charge less than $300 a week. Another third charge between $300 and $350, and the last third charges more than $350. Non-United Church camps in Canada charge $412 on average per week. And U.S. camps charge $428 U.S. per week. So camps in Eastern Canada charge less than camps in Western Canada, but really it's only $8 on average. So as far as housing and accommodations, we have a lot of rustic accommodations, or what we would indicate as rustic accommodations, 78%. Some of us offer wilderness camping. Very few, like a quarter of us offer modern cabins and dormitory style. And very few, once again, this 4% would indicate one would offer a hotel style. And when you visit American camps, what they're calling hotel style is the idea that you would have a bathroom attached to your room, like a hotel. And many of them have that set up. Modern cabins are considered with plumbing. Camps offering specialty summer camp programs. So many of us offer leadership training, but half of us offer family camp, and then it goes down from there to special needs and traveling day camps and grandparent camps. None of us apparently offer confirmation camp. Yeah. Almost half offer family camp programs. Many of these are small, with about half serving fewer than 50. 2 responding camps serve more than 100 family campers. Percentage of camps offering summer program specifics. Good news, we all offer campfires. But only 87% of us sing at those campfires. That's what I took out of this data. I'm not sure what any of the other camps are doing if you're not singing in that sense. Can you guys still hear me? Nod your heads. Perfect. Dealing with a new headset. A lot of us, like a huge majority, offer daily worship, which would sort of be offset by the lack of Bible study and group prayer. That's a weird stat. Lots of us offer environmental education, archery, canoeing, kayaking. Daily Bible study, we're still at somewhere close to 60%. Low ropes, outdoor cooking, group prayers, rock climbing, high ropes, sailing. So we showed a particular strength compared with other OMC camps in outdoor and rustic activities, where the more expensive activities were very uncommon. Under financial assistance, 10% to 25% had that. This is to indicate that 48% of our camps offer financial assistance to somewhere between 10% and 25% of their campers. And whether or not you have done the math, you may be offering financial assistance, but not calling it that, right? If we don't charge the true cost of camp, then, so for us at Pierce Williams, when we have a tier-based pricing model, anybody who pays less than tier 1, which is our top tier, the highest price tier, anybody paying tier 2 or tier 3, those are subsidized campers. They need, they're choosing financial assistance. Camper diversity is a bit of a challenge. 58% of us responded that we have less than 5% of our campers with racial minorities. And it could be your local, where we draw on, our history as camps tends to be that we draw on. So for example, once again, Pierce Williams draws on Elgin County. And if I look at the census for Elgin County, we're very close to the numbers of families and racial minorities that live within our county boundaries. What this survey also indicates to me is that there's a very specific camp that didn't fill this out, because this number would be way more than 25% if Scugog had filled this out, which serves Toronto and underprivileged kids in Toronto. This number, the camper diversity number, would be way more than 25% at Scugog, and their financial assistance would be more than 50%. And it's interesting to note, they're listing camper diversity as campers that were racial minorities. There's nowhere in the survey where we talk about LGBTQ or two-spirited, or right? Like, we just don't, it's not covered in the survey. And part of what we need to understand is the partners that we're with for this survey. Because if we were to ask some of those questions, they wouldn't, some of our churches are still going through, some of our church partners are still going through challenges with learning about the world, apparently. And so I know that the United Methodists just had in the past year, just had a vote go not the way that they had sensed it would go in terms of LGBTQ, but that's not covered anywhere on this survey. So moving down to percentage of camps using a Bible study curriculum, apparently there's a group of us, 1/3, that uses, or sorry, no, I was wrong. 5% use the Inside Out. 52% of us write our own. 14% of us have clergy-led or other visitor, and 29% of us have no set curriculum. And so this gets us into this idea of level of involvement of congregational leaders / clergy. Very few leaders and clergy are regularly involved, which is a majority of us at 25%. Leaders and clergy minister to summer staff at 27%, and then it goes down from there. The one thing that would be interesting for us to note as United Church Camps would also be this idea of how many non-denominational groups come, how many groups come that are of different denominations. Because when you go on the American side, one of the things that we, once again, wouldn't know unless we were down there, many of those camps, so be you Presbyterian or be you Lutheran or be you United Methodist, they only do retreat rentals to their own congregations. And trust me, as someone who does retreat rentals for many groups, if I had to rely on the United Church of Canada congregations to make a living renting to retreats, we would not survive. It wouldn't happen. And that's one of the challenges of some of our partners on the state side, is that they feel like if they could reach out, because if they feel like they could reach out to other denominations, they would get more income. The answer to that is yes. But you also have 3 or 4 sites literally on the same lake in Iowa that are 3 different denominations. And so you can't, right? Or you don't, because they all go to their own. There's a large disparity in terms of clergy involvement between our camps and other OMC camps. 64% of our camps have a low level of clergy involvement, while only 2 camps have a high clergy involvement. It's funny to know, and I'm not sure if we have empirical data on this, but it's funny to know how many people say how many ministry staff say they got their start at camp, right? That United Church of Canada camps have led them to where they are as ministers. And I'm not sure if those 2 things are connected, but percentage of campers affiliated with our congregations and denominations. So none of our camps had more than 75% of just United Church kids. That's what this is getting at. So this is saying there's 12% of our camps who responded that they have 51 to 75% United Church of Canada kids attend, which is fascinating because I don't know where those kids are. 26 to 50% is 25, 11 to 25%, 50% of us think that that's the number of kids who come, and less than 10%. I will say, as someone who knows just a bare minimum about statistics, that if you don't track it, you're never going to know. And so if we're guessing at this number, then we're guessing at this number. We ask on our registration form for a denominational affiliation just for statistical purposes. We found that the majority of people who attend Pierce Williams are actually Roman Catholic. But it's also more likely that Roman Catholics would claim the denomination versus somebody who grew up in a United Church or a Baptist church. They might not, at the age of 35 when they have kids, they might not claim to be a United Church person or a Baptist person at that point. Whereas in the Catholic, and I say this just by myself, in my experience with Catholic parents, once you're raised Catholic, you're always a Catholic. And so they might claim that at that moment in time differently here. But there's no big surprise in these numbers that we have fewer kids from United Church camps coming. Camp capacity is an interesting one. Half of the responding UC camps had a capacity of fewer than 90 summer campers at a time. The average capacity for United Church camps is 96. And it was significantly lower than non-UCC camps at 170. So they're saying 170 is their average space at the other camps. That's huge. It's ridiculous to have that be your average, right? Across. But for example, if you're going to Lake Junaluska for a relationship, that they might call that a camp in North Carolina, but it can also accommodate 1,000 people at one time, right? You have sites that can accommodate, 400 or 500 people. Whether you would ever have 400 or 500 campers is a wholly other thing. This chart just goes over summer camp enrollment in terms of capacity, and then higher or lower or about the same. And so in 2016, we had 8 camps respond. In 2018, we had 24 camps respond, of which 23 would be camp focused. 36% think they're 90% or higher, 27 at 75 to 90, and then 37 below 75. But this is interesting. Most of us were higher than the previous summer who responded, and very few were lower than the previous summer. This 4%, once again, the majority of the time represents one site. 44% of the people who answered, you were at the highest number of the past 5 years in your camper enrollment. And then it goes back down to somebody who was at their lowest number in the past 5 years. So these 22 camps served just under 9,000 summer campers in 2018. And half of the camps had fewer than 310 total summer campers. And then a quarter had between 310 and 500, and the last quarter had 500 or more in 2018. And the average number was 409. Single day camp programs are very uncommon in United Church. And I think that's partially because a lot of the day camps that United Churches run aren't accredited by the United Church camp standards. We never built into the system, as I understand it, a day camp sort of component for accreditation. And so lots of churches will run their own. Many churches run their own programs that we would recognize as a day camp, but not many of those leaders would be on the emails that would get the survey links for this. Camper days is an industry standard thing that none of us sort of track. Overnight and 3 meals. Only 3 responding camps reported a high of 29 camper days and a low of. So we saw an increase following the trend. And nearly half were at a 5-year enrollment high, which is awesome. This is interesting. Of the 23 responding, we had 496 paid staff in 2018, an average of 22 per camp. And then there were also 407 volunteer staff. A third of camps employed fewer than 15 paid staff and fewer volunteer staff. Training for paid staff varied from a low of 3 days to a high of 10 days, with an average of 6 days, which would be a 1 week of training. This training was considerably shorter than other OMC camps, which averaged 10 days for staff training. Average weekly salary is listed as $345 a week. And other non-UCC camps in Canada paid staff an average at $272 per week. So we're quite a bit higher than the average of other Canadian camps. The low among UCC camps was $155, and the high was $640. And then returning staff is listed here. So 22% of our camps had more than 75% of returning staff, and then the majority of us are, over half of our camps have a 50% or higher returning staff rate. Primary clientele for retreats and conferences, you have adults, youth, and children, a mix of both. And then this goes into retreat accommodations offered, rustic cabins, modern cabins, dorm style. And then that goes into just retreat guest affiliation. The majority of, I can speak for myself, and I'm not sure, I I think Rick would be the only other one who would have classified themselves as doing retreats, but none of this is a surprise to me. Less than 10% of our overall clients, if you take summer camp out of the mix, less than 10% of our overall clients are United Church of Canada. The majority of them are just other denominations or churches, or there's such a wide range of groups, but average capacity for our retreats was 112. And then this just goes into capacity and whether higher or lower than the previous years. And this is all based on retreat information. We reported weaker growth, with almost as many camps showing evidence for decline as growth in 2018 for retreats. Percentage of sites serving selected retreat clientele. So a ton of us serve, 80% of us serve school groups, 65 nonprofits not affiliated, church youth groups, adult groups unaffiliated, right? And just goes down. These are just tables. Read into them what you would like. We were more likely to offer retreats for school groups. The amenities were offered focused more on child and youth retreats than adult retreats. And UCC sites were much less likely to offer linen service. Correct. This is part 5, and this is the end. We're only two pages away from the end of this survey, and then we can talk. This idea of level of agreement with philosophical statements goes over these arrows on the side. He indicates this arrow going up. We agreed significantly more than other non-UCC sites, or significantly less, or we're about the same, no different. And so we're a place to unplug. Camp is the most important aspect of ministry. Our camp has a strong focus on nature. And so where we're higher are these 3. Camp is the most important aspect of our ministry. Our camp has a strong focus on nature, creation, and stewardship, yes. And at camp, specific theology is not as important as general spirituality and belief. And so, that's where we are the biggest. And then we have a whole bunch of things where we agree less than, I think, than the others. Comparisons offer indications that UCC ministry sites are, as a whole, quite different in ministry philosophy than other OMC sites. And so I don't think it's a huge surprise that we're different than other sites. We are a different church, but like only 5% of us level of importance assigned to selected programs. 52% of others deem the knowledge and fellowship with creation, and we clock in at 35. Whereas like fellowship and community building, we deem it extremely important. These are all on average. Don't read into these 2 numbers. They're not comparing with each other. Fun for all participants is higher, but we're quite low on these numbers. And he says UCC camp directors assign less importance on average to every priority related to faith formation compared with other OMC directors, which is an interesting way to end off the conversation in that sense. So did anybody have any surprises in their finding, or if you read through, or if you just heard me talk about it, what sticks out in your head besides my finger?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy. The piece that I am resonating with is that so many folks say that they went into ministry because of their experience at camp. That piece is really resonating for me. And and how that doesn't jive with the lack of connection to our churches. And the fact that the camps don't feel it or don't experience a connection to to their churches, like the big church or the local congregations. It just seems a bit, I have to say, a little disappointing. And I'm wondering but a possibility. I like to think about the possibility of a issue and pointing it out.
I have some thoughts on that. One of them, in the last year or so, I've gone around to quite a few. Can you hear me okay? I've gone around to quite a few different churches. And what I find in talking with congregations and people at churches, or where I'm sharing about our camp, is that many of them have a strong sense of connection to the camp from their own experiences. So I'm talking with congregations that are 60 plus years old who aren't as active now at camp. So we don't see them at camp as much, but their lived experience has many rich experiences of being at camp when they were younger, even from people who talk about maybe their grandkids coming to camp or where they've met their significant others as a result of being involved with camp. I think just we're at a time when those people aren't as connected on a day-to-day basis or even a year-to-year basis because of age and mobility. And they don't have any kids that are in the system anymore. They're looking more at grandkids and that. So I don't know if we're totally disconnected. It's certainly not as strong as it might have been 30 or 40 years ago when those same people had their kids going to camp. Does that make sense?
Jordan Sullivan here. I had a number of thoughts as I read through the responses. I wasn't surprised, and I do think, like you said, Joe, that the United Church of Canada is certainly a different kettle of fish than most Christian denominations, in particular American Christian denominations. I would have loved to have seen a breakdown of the stats comparing United Church of Canada camps with Presbyterian or other faith-based camps in Canada separately. That would, I think, give me a clear picture of how we compare with other denominations because, well, for one thing, population, or membership, church membership, and we have less than 3,000 congregations and 54 camps. So how many congregations support camps in the States with membership? And, I imagine the numbers are much larger, the population is larger, denominations are larger, so I imagine that has some impact. I think that the results are interesting, and I think they're, to some degree, they challenge the church to engage more fully with camps. At the same time, I'm also aware that we have a distinct difference between how the United Church of Canada camps, in particular, define faith formation, and you've mentioned, referred to this a couple of times. How we define faith formation in United Church camping is certainly different from most Christian denominations. When we created that faith formation at camp resource a number of years ago, it came out of this whole cry from the church that camps aren't doing enough Christian education. I think we do need to do a better job on that. I think that possibly charitable status can be impacted if we're not doing the faith formation programming, which we say is part of why we have charitable status. So that's an issue there. But I also know that United Church camps use more value-based language when it comes to our understanding of faith. Like you pointed out, the connection to creation, that's a part of our faith. And we don't use faith-based language as much. And I think that's part of the United Church camp culture.
Can you give us an example of that, Jordan? What you would say is connection-based language versus faith-based, just in the way we talk?
Personal time, Sabbath time, means quiet time on your own to commune with nature, building community, and conversations, and building your self-esteem, your self-awareness, your self-worth within camp is, to me, that's spiritual. There's so many things that, and if I didn't go through my faith formation at leadership resource that we created, but I know we have 8 or 9 guiding principles, and each of those are used more value-based language. So self-worth, self-esteem, relationships and community, relationship with creation, and on.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that strikes me is that we also, I don't know if the numbers were reflected this, but the number of campers who the United Church of Camp serves that are not from our faith community, what is that in comparison to the other denominations? Like, what do they serve in percentage of from their faith community? That has a huge impact on how you run your program. And I found it interesting that we have this lack of full-time staff, which has an impact on programming, etc. But we're strong in the area of leadership development, but we have young adult seasonal directors. So there's a question of leadership development that sort of comes up for me in all this.
I don't think, like, I personally don't question our ability to create amazing leaders. And when you go out and you see the number of ministers, and I'm not sure if it's the same out east or out west, but people who've gone into ministry because they found that at camp in some way, shape, or form. And that, none of that over years in camping full time as a camping professional, I've never questioned our ability as United Church Camps to create great leaders. But yeah, it is interesting how the data is at a juxtaposition in that sense. Any other comments? I know we're a couple of minutes from the 8:30, but we can keep talking. If you need to leave, you need to leave. But if you have comments, we can feel free to chat about them.
I don't know. This discussion's been going on a long time with us. It's interesting, though, if you went to any of those other groups that we'll be seeing at the Great Gathering, they may have started it with a prayer, and when they're talking about these issues, there may have been more reference to God and that kind of thing. And that so part of it is the way the United Church does things is a little less formal, I think. But I don't really see any problem with the ministers coming out of camping, because, as you say, Joe, great leaders come out of here. I mean, the moderator of the church was a camp person, like came out of with Marty Tyndall a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. So I think we don't do as much formal, like, Bible training or those kinds of things, but we do a lot of really good Christian training and a lot of talking to people about how they feel about God, and it's not something we shy away from talking about. And we have a wide range. We have we're maybe in the plus 10% for diversity at our camp.
Yeah.
On some. So and there are a lot of other religions there. We do take stats coming in, so it's about half say they're United Church or just say Christian. So
yeah,
and then there's a chunk of Roman Catholic, actually, like adding on top of that. So I don't see it as being surprising that leaders and ministers come out of camp with it, because I'm not sure you become a minister or get that calling from, some people maybe do, from the like book learning. A lot of that calling comes from the experience, I think. But it is interesting because this reads more bluntly with you going through it than when I went through it, of the, we don't, you know, we sort of don't teach Christian values, and we have very strong connections to some congregations, but not all of them. Definitely not all of them. So anyway.
Maybe, this is Allison here. Maybe it could come the other way around. Instead of worrying about getting chaplains and ministers out to the camp, perhaps having, say, a camp winter party at the church in the off season, and just showing the youth that, hey, there's year-round programming here for youth, and kind of having a alumni party within our towns or cities, or off-site, but have it camp themed. So it could go perhaps the opposite direction that we think, with the connection to the churches.
Well, and I also think it's like evaluating staff. We all, on a scale of 1 to 10, we're all going to have a different version of what what a 7 is and what an 8 is. And so when we say what the connection to our churches is if I run programs with our churches, theoretically that's a strong connection. But I might consider that 1 week of Vacation Bible Camp doesn't qualify as a strong connection to that church, whereas a church might feel like that's like a huge connection to them.
I'd love everybody to get a chance. So if somebody else has something to say, I'll wait, but
just talk, Kathy, just talk.
I think that there's there's a few things that raised around my support that camps need for me. The notion that our directors, or folks with a lot of authority, a lot of accountability at our camps, are don't have years of experience, and also are young. And it is it's hard to have authority sometimes when you're a young person, with parents, with even fellow staff people. And I just think that's an opportunity for to be very aware that those folks are looking, they could use a different kind of support maybe than others could. And I'm looking at this group right now on this call. It's not reflecting that. So how come? And I'm not criticizing. I just think we're obviously, they have other stuff going on. Their age probably has something to do with that. Their experience level. So I just, I think it's an opportunity. And the other opportunity is the cultural diversity. And I know that our camps represent what we think. Well, I think they represent our church for sure in our rural area, but they aren't representing our rural areas as well as it should. I think our rural areas are becoming more diverse too. And I wonder what that opportunity could be, to be saying, what could we be offering that would appeal to families who probably don't have a big experience around camp if it's not their culture. But I wonder if we can help make it their culture.
Yeah, that was the other thing that stood up for me. We did, I think it was 2016, the last Connections. We did a State of the United Church camp. That was the last time I've done stats from camps on diversity, and it showed that the diversity we have at camps are vastly different from the diversity of the communities in the areas where we exist. Because racial diversity is growing. And when we consider the indigenous communities, that takes the number way and above beyond where we're not meeting the diversity in the areas of our camp. And that's as a whole. I mean, there are some that are, but just in a broad picture.
A another piece that I think the whole survey didn't capture, maybe didn't intend to or had no need to, but the challenges, the bigger challenges of our camps, like behavioral stuff, I hear things are increasing a lot, and the support for it is not great. And that could be mental health. It could be just discipline stuff, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's a piece I heard lots about. There's a greater, and I don't know why that wasn't included with the survey, or maybe it doesn't matter for this purpose.
Yeah, we didn't add any questions to the survey that were specific to us, and I'm not sure that that was given to us as an option. Okay. This is the first time, as the United Church Canada, our history is that in 2016 was the first time we knew this survey existed for us to fill out, and in 2018 we funded a portion of it. We as the United Church Canada don't invest a lot of money into the Outdoor Ministries connection. The Ministry and Service, or the Mission and Service Fund, has supplied me with travel costs and accommodations to go to the meetings, which is great. And the Mission and Service paid for $1,000 of this survey cost. And so it is, in the future, I'm not sure if we can do what they call oversampling, is, I believe, if you're a statistics person, is what we're asking about. What are specific questions we can ask of our own camps as well? So if there's nobody else who's interested in chatting, it's interesting information. And to read both of them, if you didn't take the time, 15 minutes, you can go through each of these surveys. And when I say each, I mean the full 2018 for the 303 sites and ours. I'm not sure how we move forward. I'm not sure what the next steps are. I'm wary to, we as United Church Camps have always been very independent of each other, right? We exist in vacuums. Bar Harbor never talks to Camp Kidston because they don't know they exist, right? It's this whole, until we get to this point where all of a sudden we do know we exist, which is the point of these monthly calls, is to try and make sure that all of our camp friends and family know that there's a group of us out here who show, as I can see in your faces tonight, who show interest and concern and questions about what camping is and what camping can be. And so I think this is a valuable conversation for us. If there's anybody else have anything they want to throw in at the last moment? Because we all have election coverage to go watch. So let's get this right. Just so we can update you on the schedules, there is no November call. The November meeting is going to take place at the Great Gathering on the Tuesday night. I know that Dan's going. I know Doug's going. I know Kathy's going. Anybody else? Janice, you're going. Awesome. Ryan, are you going to North Carolina? You can nod or not nod. Oh,
Can't make this one, so.
Okay. That's fine. I know Rick's going. So, and I don't know if Allison is going, but the Tuesday night we have the Ontario people will have a bus there, and we'll go as a group. We can go out to dinner and meet and chat, and make those connections. Because, right, I met Janice this summer at Kidston, and I met people like, honestly, the people on the Rock, Newfoundland and Labrador, were super, super excited to see a bunch of non-Rock people show up and show interest in their camps, which is awesome. In fact, we have a lady from one of the Newfoundland camps coming to North Carolina. So that is awesome as well. The next scheduled call is Monday, December 9th, and we're going to talk about camp promotion and camper recruitment tips and tricks. So let's go with that, and we'll send a sign-out email up. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.